The ID didn't just slide. It skidded, plastic scraping against marble. A sharp, deliberate flick of the wrist, too practiced to be accidental, sent it spinning across the bank floor like something disposable. Like something unclean. The sound echoed louder than it should have. Conversation in the lobby died mid-sentence. A woman near the brochures gasped. A man adjusting his cufflinks froze with one sleeve half-buttoned. Someone whispered, "Did she really just?" Danielle Ross didn't move. She stood at the counter, hands folded calmly in front of her, posture straight, expression unreadable. If the teller expected her to flinch, to scramble, to apologize for existing in the wrong space, she was disappointed. The teller leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. "You can pick that up when you're done," she said loudly. "We don't play games here." The words weren't meant for Danielle alone. They were projected, broadcast to the room. A public branding. Danielle blinked once. Slow. Controlled. "I'm here for a wire confirmation," she said evenly. The teller smirked. "No, you're not." The certainty in her voice was unsettling, as if reality itself bent to her judgment. People don't just walk in with names like that expecting executive-level access. A phone camera lifted from the line behind Danielle. Then another. The teller didn't notice, or didn't care. She tapped her keyboard with exaggerated authority. "High-risk profile," she announced. "That means additional verification." Danielle tilted her head slightly. "I'd like to speak to a manager." The teller laughed. Not quietly. "Of course you would." She pressed a button beneath the desk. A guard shifted his weight nearby, already stepping closer. His hand hovered near his radio. His eyes were not neutral. "Until we verify," the teller said, voice sharp, "you'll stay right there." Danielle glanced down. Her ID rested on the floor between polished shoes and briefcases. Ross Holdings, embossed, valid, unquestionable to anyone who bothered to look. She still didn't bend. "What policy allows the physical disposal of identification?" Danielle asked. The teller leaned forward. "The policy where frauds get exposed." That did it. Phones were fully out now. The manager arrived moments later, irritation first, curiosity second. He had the walk of a man used to authority being unquestioned. "What's the issue?" he asked. The teller answered quickly. She presented an unverified ID, claimed executive access, and became confrontational. Danielle spoke calmly. "My ID was thrown." The manager sighed, already done with this. "Ma'am, if you'd like to step aside." "No." The word landed flat, firm, unmovable. The manager stiffened. "Excuse me." I said no. The guard's posture changed. The teller scoffed. "See? Always the same attitude." Danielle finally bent down. She retrieved her ID, placed it carefully back on the counter. "Run it," she said. "Properly." The teller rolled her eyes and typed. Her smirk faded. The system paused, then locked. Her screen flashed red. "What did you do?" the teller snapped. "I asked you to verify," Danielle replied. The manager leaned in. "What's your full name?" "Danielle Ross." Something shifted. The manager stepped back and checked his tablet. Silence spread. Thick, uncomfortable, undeniable. A junior employee at the adjacent desk stared at her own screen, eyes widening. "Sir," she whispered. "Her name is on the internal memo." The manager frowned. "Which memo?" "The merger oversight." The teller laughed sharply. "That's impossible." Danielle said nothing. The manager swallowed. "Ma'am, are you affiliated with Ross Holdings?" Danielle nodded once. "Founder. CO." The lobby froze. The teller's face drained of color. "She's lying." The junior employee shook her head. "She's not." The manager stepped back again. "The pending merger," Danielle said evenly, "is under my authority. And as of this moment, it's under review." A murmur rippled through the room. The teller slammed her hands on the desk. "You can't do that over one misunderstanding." Danielle looked at her. "You threw my ID on the floor." That's not. You escalated, Danielle continued. You involved security. You publicly humiliated a client without verification. The manager opened his mouth. Danielle raised one finger. He stopped. This bank is seeking a $5.9 billion merger to stabilize its regional exposure, she said. My firm controls the approval. Danielle turned to the junior employee. How long did the verification take once it was run? 6 seconds, she answered quietly. Danielle faced the teller. You chose humiliation instead. The teller's voice cracked. I was following policy. Danielle nodded. So was I. She sent a single message. The teller's screen went dark. What happened? She whispered. The manager checked his tablet. Your access has been suspended. The guard stepped back, suddenly unsure. This interaction has been documented, Danielle said. Timestamped. Witnessed. We can make this right, the manager pleaded. You had the chance. She turned toward the exit. I came here to confirm whether this institution deserved partnership. It does not. Corporate called. The merger was paused. The teller collapsed into her chair. Danielle walked out. At the door, she paused. Next time, she said calmly. Verify first. She left. Behind her, a bank realized its procedures had just cost it everything. What the bank didn't know was that this was only the first decision. Because by morning, regulators would be involved. Board members would panic. And a second file, one far more damaging, was already being opened. And the teller? She hadn't yet learned who would be calling her next. By morning, the bank's name was already trending. Not for innovation. Not for growth. For arrogance. Internal emails leaked before the sun fully rose. Screenshots of suspended access. Whispers of a merger, paused pending conduct review. No official statements yet, but panic doesn't wait for confirmation. Inside the executive boardroom, panic had a seat at the table. Who authorized this? The chairman snapped, slamming his palm against polished oak. No one answered. The CEO stared at the screen mounted at the far end of the room, Danielle Ross's name glowing in black letters, unmistakable. Founder. CEO. Oversight Authority. $5.9 billion. Their lifeline. Gone. This doesn't make sense, one board member muttered. She walked in alone? Yes, the compliance officer replied. No entourage. No announcement. Silence followed, because everyone in that room understood the implication. She wasn't trying to intimidate them. She was testing them, and they failed. Across town, Danielle Ross sat in her office, sunlight slicing through floor-to-ceiling windows. The city buzzed below, unaware that one institution was unraveling quietly because it forgot a basic rule. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't threatened. She hadn't needed to. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She let it ring. Then again. And again. Finally, she answered. This is Danielle Ross. A man's voice rushed through the speaker. Ms. Ross, this is Richard Hale, CEO of... I know who you are, Danielle said calmly. A pause. We'd like to formally apologize for yesterday's incident. Which part? Danielle asked. The public humiliation? The false accusation? Or the misuse of security? Another pause, longer this time. All of it, he said carefully. Danielle leaned back in her chair. Apologies are not corrective actions, she replied. They're reactions. We're prepared to terminate the employee involved, Hale said quickly. Effective immediately. Danielle closed her eyes for a brief moment. There it is, she said. That instinct. What instinct? Hale asked. To sacrifice the lowest rung and call it accountability. Silence. She didn't create your culture, Danielle continued. She performed it perfectly. Hale swallowed audibly. We are willing to cooperate fully, he said. Name your conditions. Danielle smiled faintly. That's the problem, she said. You think this is a negotiation. She hung up. At the same moment, the teller, Melissa Grant, sat alone in her apartment, blinds drawn, phone clutched in shaking hands. Her access badge no longer worked. Her work email had been disabled. Her manager hadn't answered a single call. Instead, HR sent a calendar invite. Mandatory review, at 9 a.m. No explanation. No reassurance. She replayed the moment over and over again in her mind. The ID on the floor. The calm voice. The way the room had shifted. She had been sure. So sure. People like that always were. Her phone buzzed. A voicemail. From an unfamiliar number. Ms. Grant, the voice said coolly. This is the Office of Financial Oversight. Please contact us immediately regarding an inquiry. Her breath caught. This wasn't HR. This was something else. Back at Ross Holdings, Danielle stood before a wall-sized screen displaying the bank's internal audit trail. Not hacked. Not stolen. Granted. Because when institutions chase capital, they often forget who holds leverage. Her COO stood beside her. They're bleeding, he said. Stocks already dipping. Danielle nodded. Not enough, she replied. He hesitated. You're certain about escalating this? Danielle turned to him. Let me be clear, she said. This isn't about revenge. She gestured to the screen. This is about precedent. She tapped one file. Customer complaints, dismissed. Discrimination flags, closed without review. Internal warnings, ignored. They didn't just humiliate me yesterday, Danielle said. They perfected the process long before I arrived. Her COO exhaled slowly. And the merger? Danielle paused. That depends on what else we uncover. Across the city, regulators entered the bank's headquarters quietly. No press, no spectacle, just badges, clipboards, authority. Employees whispered. Managers avoided eye contact. The chairman watched from his office as the compliance floor filled with unfamiliar faces. This is spiraling, he muttered. His assistant knocked. Sir, she said softly. There's something else. What now? The junior employee, she hesitated. The one who spoke up yesterday? Yes. She's being requested for a statement. The chairman frowned. By who? She swallowed. By Ms. Ross's legal team. Melissa Grant sat in a stark conference room hours later, hands folded tightly in her lap. Across from her, a woman in a dark suit slid a folder forward. Do you recognize this document? She asked. Melissa glanced down. Training policies. Escalation procedures. Highlighted. Annotated. Those are the guidelines, Melissa said quietly. And did you follow them? The woman asked. Melissa hesitated. I followed what I was shown. The woman nodded. That's what we thought. She closed the folder. One more question, Ms. Grant, she said. How often were you encouraged to challenge assumptions? Melissa's throat tightened. Never. By nightfall, the bank released a statement. Pending review. Commitment to values. Taking this seriously. The market didn't care. Stock dropped another 5%. The merger remained frozen. Danielle watched the news silently from her office. Her assistant entered. Ma'am, she said. There's something you should see. She handed Danielle a tablet. An internal email, time-stamped 3 years earlier. A warning. A pattern. A signature at the bottom. The same manager who'd told her to step aside. Danielle's expression hardened, not with anger, but with clarity. She handed the tablet back. Prepare the next file, she said. The assistant nodded. For the board. Danielle looked out at the city. No, she said softly. For the public. What the bank still didn't understand was that the merger was the smallest consequence. Because once trust is audited, once patterns are exposed, once silence is documented, someone always falls higher than expected. And tomorrow morning, a name far bigger than a teller's would be called into question. Verify First, Part 3. A Black Empowerment Dramatic Short Story. The board member didn't sleep that night. He sat alone in his penthouse office, city lights bleeding through glass walls, replaying a single sentence in his head. Prepare the next file. By sunrise, that sentence would become his problem. The call came at 6:12 a.m. Not from the bank, not from legal, from a private number reserved for one thing only: crisis. "Sir," the voice on the other end said carefully, "you've been named." The man closed his eyes. "By who?" "Ross Holdings, and the Office of Financial Oversight." Silence followed, the kind that only comes when denial is no longer an option. "For what?" he finally asked. The voice lowered. "Patterned misconduct. Suppression of internal reports. Cultural negligence." The board member laughed once, sharp, defensive. "This is absurd. I never interacted with that woman." "That's the issue," the voice replied. "You didn't need to." By 9 a.m., the bank's headquarters was surrounded, not by press but by tension. Executives whispered in corners. Assistants avoided names. Laptops snapped shut when footsteps approached. At 9:17, the chairman entered the building and stopped cold. 2 regulators waited in the lobby, and behind them stood Danielle Ross. Not as a visitor, as an authority. She wore a charcoal suit this time. No bag, no ID in her hand. She didn't need one. "Good morning," she said evenly. The chairman forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Ms. Ross, we were not informed." "You were," Danielle replied. 3 years ago." She handed him a single page, an internal memo. His signature at the bottom. His face drained. In the boardroom, silence ruled. Every seat was filled. No one spoke. Danielle stood at the head of the table. "This institution," she began calmly, "has confused scale with immunity." She tapped the screen behind her. Case after case appeared. Not dramatic, not viral, documented, time-stamped, ignored. "You trained employees to escalate suspicion without evidence," Danielle continued. "You rewarded compliance over competence, and when challenged, you hid behind policy." Her gaze landed on one man, the board member from the memo. "You approved the framework," she said. He cleared his throat. "We followed industry standards." Danielle tilted her head. "Industry standards don't explain why every flagged incident involved the same demographic pattern." A regulator shifted in his chair. The man's jaw tightened. "This is a reach," he said. "You're interpreting intent where none exists." Danielle smiled faintly. "Intent is irrelevant," she replied. "Impact is measurable." She clicked again. "Graph. Trends. Outcomes. This isn't bias," she said. "It's design." The room felt smaller. Across the city, Melissa Grant watched the press conference from her apartment. The headline scrolled. "Senior board member under investigation amid merger freeze." Her name wasn't mentioned. She felt no relief, only the weight of realization. She had never been the center. She had been the cover. Back in the boardroom, the chairman finally spoke. "What do you want?" he asked quietly. Danielle turned to him. "I want reform that survives leadership changes," she said. "External oversight, transparent escalation protocols, and a public acknowledgement, not an apology." The board member slammed his hand on the table. "This is extortion." The regulators stood. One of them spoke. "No," he said. "This is compliance." The man froze. Danielle gathered her papers. "The merger remains paused," she said. "Pending full cooperation." She paused at the door. "And one more thing." The room leaned in despite itself. "The junior employee who spoke up," Danielle said. "She's being offered a position at Ross Holdings." Gasps followed. "Merit," Danielle added, "should never be punished." She left. By evening, the board member's resignation leaked. By night, the market reacted. By morning, the story wouldn't be controllable. Danielle stood in her office again, city alive below. Her COO approached. "They're calling this a reckoning," he said. Danielle nodded. "It's not," she replied. "It's a beginning." Her phone buzzed. A message from an unfamiliar number. "There's something you missed." She stared at the screen. "What?" her COO asked. Danielle looked up slowly. "Someone else signed off on the framework," she said. Her expression sharpened. "And they're bigger." What the public didn't know yet was that the bank wasn't the origin. It was the example. Because power doesn't collapse in isolation. It reveals networks, and the next name in the file wasn't just influential, it was untouchable. Until now. Stay ready. Because Verify First isn't finished, and the next fall won't happen quietly. The name sat alone on the screen. No title, no explanation. Just 4 letters that carried more weight than the entire bank combined. Danielle Ross didn't say it out loud. She didn't need to. Everyone in the room recognized it instantly. Her COO broke the silence first. "That can't be right," he said carefully. "If that's true, this goes beyond a merger." Danielle's eyes never left the screen. It always did. The problem with systems built to protect power is that they rely on one dangerous assumption: that the people who benefit from them will never be questioned. Danielle had learned that lesson long before she ever stepped into that bank. She learned it years ago, when Ross Holdings was still considered aspirational. When meetings ended without decisions. When praise never translated into partnership. She remembered the rooms where she wasn't ignored, just managed. Where compliments were used like sedation. Where access always came with conditions. That's how she knew. This wasn't about one teller, or one manager, or even one board. This was about architecture. The call came from Washington before noon. Not aggressive, not apologetic, measured. "Ms. Ross," the voice said, "we're aware you've uncovered information tied to a federally integrated financial framework." Danielle leaned back in her chair. "I didn't uncover it," she replied. "It was handed to me, repeatedly, and ignored." A pause. "You understand the implications of proceeding," the voice continued. "There are relationships involved." Danielle smiled faintly. "Yes," she said. "That's what makes them traceable." Another pause, longer this time. "We'd like to discuss containment." Danielle's voice cooled. "I don't contain truth," she said. "I document it." The line went quiet. Then, "What do you want?" Danielle answered without hesitation. "Independent review. Full disclosure. And immunity for whistleblowers, past and present." "That's extensive." "So is the damage," Danielle replied. She ended the call. Across the city, the bank's former board member watched the news in silence. His resignation letter hadn't protected him. It had exposed him. Investigators weren't just reading his emails anymore. They were following his introductions, his recommendations, his signatures. Every path led upward, and every path crossed the same name. At Ross Holdings, Danielle convened a small meeting. No press, no advisors, just 5 people who understood one thing very clearly. This was no longer about leverage. This was about legacy. "We release the findings in phases," her legal counsel said. "Not all at once." Danielle nodded. "Start with the structure," she said. "Let people see the pattern before they see the players." "And when the name surfaces?" the COO asked. Danielle looked at him. "It will surface on its own." The first report dropped at 6 p.m. No commentary, no accusations, just data, promotion pipelines, risk classifications, escalation outcomes. The internet did the rest. Analysts noticed the consistency. Journalists followed the money. Advocates connected the dots. By midnight, the question wasn't if someone powerful was involved. It was how far back it went. Melissa Grant sat in the dark, phone glowing in her hand. She had received another message. This one from Ross Holdings. "We'd like to speak with you." Voluntarily. Protected. She stared at it for a long time. Then she typed back. "Okay." Danielle watched the city again as night fell. Her assistant entered quietly. "They're pushing back," she said. "Hard." Danielle nodded. They always do right before they fold. Another message buzzed on Danielle's phone. From an encrypted channel. You're getting close. Be careful. She didn't flinch. Instead, she replied, I know. Then she added one more line. So are you. What no one had confirmed yet was that the name on that screen was connected to more than finance. It touched regulation, media, policy, and once it fell, the fallout wouldn't be economic, it would be national, because the most dangerous assumption power ever make is believing it will never be verified, and Danielle Ross was done asking for permission. The silence didn't break all at once, it cracked. Hairline fractures spreading through institutions that had survived for decades by never being questioned out loud. By the time the second report dropped, denial was no longer an option. This time, the name was visible. No initials, no redactions, no buffers. It belonged to a man whose face had been on panels, whose quotes were framed in policy papers, whose endorsements moved markets without fingerprints. He wasn't a banker. He was a gatekeeper, and the moment his name became searchable, everything changed. The morning news didn't lead with outrage. It led with confusion. Sources confirm an ongoing federal inquiry. Documents suggest coordinated oversight failures. Multiple institutions named. By noon, confusion became focus. The same name appeared again and again. Different boards, different banks, different agencies. Same approvals, same silence, same outcomes. It wasn't corruption in the dramatic sense. It was worse. It was normalization. Danielle Ross watched it unfold from her office, untouched by the noise. She hadn't leaked anything. She hadn't accused anyone publicly. She had done something far more dangerous. She had verified. Her phone rang once more. This time, it wasn't a request. It was a confirmation. Ms. Ross, the voice said, steady but restrained. The individual in question has stepped down effective immediately. Danielle closed her eyes briefly. And the framework? She asked. Being dismantled. And the protections? In place. A pause. You've changed how this will be handled going forward. Danielle opened her eyes. No, she replied calmly. I changed who gets believed. Across the city, Melissa Grant sat in a quiet room, hands resting on a signed statement. She hadn't been punished. She hadn't been erased. She had been listened to for the first time. The woman across from her stood and offered her hand. Thank you, she said. Your testimony mattered. Melissa nodded slowly. For the first time, she believed it. By evening, the bank released a final statement. Not a promise. Not a justification. An acknowledgement. The merger was officially withdrawn. The institution would restructure under external oversight. Markets adjusted. So did expectations. Danielle Ross stood before the same city one last time that night. The lights looked different now, not because they had changed, but because she had. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't demanded respect. She hadn't needed revenge. She had simply refused to accept humiliation as procedure. Her assistant approached quietly. They're calling this a turning point, she said. Danielle considered that. No, she replied. It's a reminder. A reminder that dignity doesn't announce itself. That power often overreaches. And that assumptions collapse the moment someone checks the record. She picked up her bag and headed for the door. At the threshold, she paused. Not for the city. For the idea. Because somewhere else, in another office, another lobby, another quiet humiliation, someone was being underestimated right now. And the only difference between silence and justice was whether someone would verify first. If this story resonated with you, don't let it stop here. Subscribe to this channel for stories that expose power, challenge assumptions, and remind us that dignity is not optional. Like this video so it reaches someone who needs to hear it. Share it with someone who has ever been dismissed, overlooked, or underestimated. And comment, verify first, if you believe accountability should never depend on appearances. Because truth doesn't need permission. It only needs witnesses.